Hi guys, hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to our series of Azure Active Directory, and in this video we are going to talk about the process that you need to follow in order to set up Azure AD Application Proxy so that you can publish one on-prem application. Now, if you're watching the series from the beginning, in the last video, we have discussed about what is Azure AD Application Proxy, how exactly it works, an overview of both the authentication model. The first one was pass-through and the other one was pre-auth. Whereas the core agenda of this video will be knowing what are the license requirement, what is the setup requirement, what things you need to keep in mind before you go ahead and install connectors. What are the basic network requirements which must be in place before you go ahead with the setup, how to publish an on-prem application, and how to troubleshoot common issues by checking the events in Event Viewer. So now let's proceed by knowing our first requirement, which is the license requirement. Now this is a premium feature, so you need Azure AD Premium subscription. When it comes to installing connector, the server on which you will be installing connector must be at least Windows 2012 R2 or above. Now before installing connector on any of your server, what you have to make sure that TLS 1.2 is enabled. Now these are some of the settings when it comes to registry which you can verify. I will be sharing this in the description section as well. The next one is network requirement. The server on which you are installing connector must be able to contact the application server as well as the outbound connectivity for all the endpoints and URLs that belongs to Azure AD Application Proxy must be accessible from this particular server on port 443 and 80. Now, it's always the best practice to always refer to the official document when it comes to doing network configuration because it is exceptionally important for you to have all the endpoints and URLs whitelisted. The next one is connector. Now consider a scenario wherein you are publishing three different applications, and out of those three applications, the first application is going to receive most of the traffic. So in these kind of scenarios, you can actually have two connectors specifically working for one particular application, and how to achieve this kind of setup is by placing these connectors into groups. And this is what we called connector groups. So you can actually have two dedicated connectors only listening or only querying the traffic that's moreover related to one specific application. Now, since we know the basic license requirement, setup requirements, network requirements, and how the connector works, let me show you the sample application which I will be publishing through Azure AD Application Proxy, and what will make sure that this application is accessible on a machine which is as of now not able to communicate to the internal network. So for that, what I have done is I have installed Visual Studio on my DC and I have created an MVC app. And now let's initiate this application and let's see what is the user experience. Now the expected behavior is I should be getting prompted for entering my username and password. And as you can see, this application has now been initiated. I'll close this page and I'll maximize this window. And I am getting the prompt to enter my username and password. So what I'll do is I'll enter my username and my password. If this would have been a different browser like Edge or IE, it would have been a Windows security prompt. Okay, so the expected behavior is I should be landed up to the home page of my application, and as you can see, this is what I am getting. Okay, now the next step is to proceed with our first use case wherein we will check what will be the user experience if an application is being published with pass-through authentication, wherein Azure AD will not authenticate user and conditional access will not be processed. So now to begin with deploying an application through Azure AD Application Proxy, the first step that needs to be done is get the application added in Azure AD. Okay, so for that, I'm going to switch to my browser where I've signed in as global admin. Now the next step is to click on Azure AD and then click on Application Proxy. Now, if you have never published any application through Azure AD Application Proxy, and if you have never installed any connector, this field will be blank for you. but I've already deployed other applications as well. So that's why I'm getting this particular connectors listed over here. And as of now, both of them are inactive. Okay. So the first option that you have to select to deploy a new application for remote access is configure an app. Okay. Now the first option that I'm getting over here is name. Okay. So since I'm publishing an HR application for remote access, I can simply name it as, let's say, HR remote access. Now it is asking me for the internal URL of my application. So now this is the value that you have to list or that you have to take from the application itself. So as of now, as you can see, this application is accessible for this particular link. So I'll just copy this link and now I'll go back to my browser and paste this value here. Okay, now depending upon the name that you choose, there will be an external link that will be suggested, but that doesn't mean that you have to use this. You can change this value as well as you can add your own verified custom domain as well. But the fact is that in this particular case, you have to create a DNS record that should point the actual request to this particular link, which will get generated by default. So I'm going to leave it blank and I'll list down the methods how you can do this in the description section. Okay. Now, as you can see, I'm getting the method now to choose the authentication. As I've said before that this is a demo for pass-through authentication, I'll select the option which says pass-through, and now the next option is connector group. As I've explained before that if you're planning to deploy connectors specifically for one particular application, you can create connector groups and then place two or more connectors in a specific group and then get added that connector over here. This is how you can actually confine a particular connector group to work for a specific application altogether. Now these are advanced settings which you can implement as per your requirement. So the first one is backend application timeout. Now the default value is 85 seconds, but if you keep it on long, this value gets increased to 180 seconds. Now set this value to long only if your application is slow and it requires some time to be connected. Okay. The next one is use HTTP cookie only. Now you have to select this option to yes if you want only HTTP flag to be mentioned in the response headers. Similarly, you can use secure cookies, you can use persistent cookies, and you can use the features when it comes to translation of URLs. It all depends what kind of application you want to publish and how you want that application to behave, or what are the restrictions, how a particular application is as of now working in your on-prem environment. Okay, so now I'm going to click on add. As of now, you can see that I'm getting a prompt which says you don't have any connectors configured. That means once this application is added, the next step is to go ahead and deploy the connector so that the connector can actually query all the requests which is reaching Azure AD Application Proxy service. So now my application is added and the next step is to go ahead and deploy the connector itself. So now to download the connector, what you can do is you can click on Azure AD and then click on application proxy and then click on this option which says download connector service. This will download a setup file on my particular machine. I'll copy this value to my DC and then I will initiate or resume the video. So now the connector is downloaded and I have copied it in my DC itself and I'm going to initiate the installation. Now, before initiating the installation, make sure TLS 1.2 is enabled and this machine on which you are installing connector must be able to communicate the machine where the application is running. In my case, it's the same machine, so there is no network change required. As well as the same machine on which you are installing the Azure AD Application Proxy connector must be able to communicate on port 443 and 80 to all the endpoints and URLs that are responsible for Azure AD Application Proxy service. So I've selected this option of I agree and now I'm going to click on install. There will be only one prompt that I will be getting where I will be entering my global admin credentials so that this connector can get registered with my Azure AD. That's the only configuration that you have to do, or that's the only interaction which this setup wants from an admin, and there is nothing else that you have to do. Once the agent is installed, your application will be published and will be accessible from the external link altogether. Okay, so as you can see now, I am getting the prompt to enter my username and password. It's working a bit slow, and here it is. So I'm going to enter my username, and then I will enter my password, and then I think everything will be in place. I will also show you the logs which will get generated the moment Azure AD Application Proxy connector is installed. So it will be more relatable for you to understand how things are working, as well as if the installation fails for some reason, which logs you should refer to get to know more details in terms of understanding why the installation is not getting completed. So now the connector is installed, and the next step is to go ahead and check the services which is responsible for Azure AD Application Proxy connector. Okay, for that you can just go to services.msc and check for these two services, which is Microsoft AD Application Proxy Connector and Connector Updater. This service is responsible to get the connector updated once there's new release which is available. Now the next step is to go ahead and check whether the application is working as expected or not. So for that, I'm going to switch to my browser where we have added the Azure AD Application Proxy application. That means our internal application, which has to be published. And now I'll go to Azure AD, and then I'll go to Enterprise Applications. And here I'm going to search for my application, which we have just added, which is HR Remote Access. Now, from this particular console, we can get the external link, which we have defined initially, so that we can go ahead and access this particular application. Okay. Now, as you can see, I'm getting this particular link listed over here as homepage URL, as well as if you can click on application proxy, you'll get the same console again, from where if you want, you can make any changes. Okay. So I'll copy this particular value now. And now I will open a new instance of a browser wherein I will be signing in from an external machine and see whether this application is accessible or not. So this is my browser where I will try to access my application with the help of an external link, and this particular machine cannot contact either my DC or my internal network. I don't have any client on this particular machine. It is something that's going to work absolutely with Azure AD Application Proxy. And as you can see, now I'm getting the prompt to enter my username and password. Okay, so I'm going to type my username and password. And then let's see what is the expected behavior. Okay, the expected behavior is I should land up to my application page, but if there will be any formatting issues, which you can see as of now, this is because the certain bootstrap, or let's say JavaScripts which are there in my application, are not publicly accessible. And the reason why I'm saying this, because I was also taking a fiddler trace at the same time. And as you can see, all these scripts are not accessible. So if your application has any JavaScript or any other supporting what should I say, style sheets, make sure that that is also accessible, because otherwise then the users will experience something like this. The formatting will not be in place. So now that we have seen that how the application is going to work if you have pass-through authentication, let's check our another use case wherein the Azure AD is responsible for authentication, as well as conditional access will be processed. So if I talk about the use case which we have just covered, in this use case, since it is passed through, the moment user was going to the external link, he or she was directly getting landed to the application console where he or she was getting prompted to enter the username and password. Now the reason behind that is because Azure AD was not involved. But in the next use case that we are going to talk about, wherein we will be covering Azure AD Pre Authentication, in this case, Azure AD will be authenticating the user and getting the conditional access processed. So now let's switch to our browser where we will be adding the application. So I'll go back to my same browser where I'm signed in as global admin. This is something which is not required as of now because we are using the same application which is hosted on-prem. So what I'll do is I'll quickly delete this particular application and then we'll create a new application, and this time with pre-authentication. Okay. And to showcase how it is going to work with the conditional access, we'll also create a conditional access policy and scope this particular application to get prompted or to prompt user to complete MFA process. So as of now, the application has been deleted, which we have added initially. Now I'll click on new application and then I will click on another method which is on-prem application. This is the same console which you can access if you will go to application proxy as well. So this time we are adding HR, and this application requires pre-authentication to be done by Azure AD. So I'll go back to my machine where we have application up and running and connector is already in place. I'm not going to make any change in the connector. I'm going to use the default connector itself, and as you can see it is selected over here. So the internal URL is the same URL, but here I have mentioned HR Azure AD. The purpose of all these options remains same, but here instead of pass through I'm selecting Azure AD and I'm not going to make any change in the connector group. Now I will click on add. Now once this application is added, what we'll do is we'll create a conditional access policy so that the user should get prompted to enter username and password as well as get the MFA verified before the request can reach the internal link of my application. So for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Azure AD, and then I'm going to click on security, and now I'm going to click on conditional access. I'll quickly create a new policy wherein I will say that if any authentication is coming for a specific user, let's say we are going to target the same user, which is enter. I'll select this user here, and then I will say if this user is trying to access one of the application named as HR, then you should prompt for MFA. So as you can see, this is my application. I'll select this application from here and now grant access, require multi-factor authentication. That's all I'm doing. I'll click on select. I'll name this policy as HR, say MFA, and then I will click on and create. That's it. A conditional access policy has been created for this particular application. Now, there is one more thing which you can verify when you're trying to add an application through an Azure AD pre-auth method, and that is whether user assignment required is being set to yes for that application or not. If I click on this particular application and then I'll go to the properties section, there will be an option which says user assignment required, and that will be set to yes by default. Now this happens when you add an application with Azure AD pre-auth method. Now this is something which is by design because in this way you can use the user and group assignment feature of Azure Active Directory. So let's copy this link now and let's see what will be the user experience. The expected user experience is that I should be prompted for MFA and then it should fail with the authorization message. Likewise, you're not supposed to access this particular application. So I'm going to sign in with my same user for which I have created the conditional access policy. And now I'm going to enter my password. And then let's see whether I get a message that MFA is getting processed or not. And as you can see, it is showing me that the MFA is getting processed, as well as I got the code now. So I'll enter my code and then I will do verify. Now let's see what is the expected error that we get. And as you can see, this corporate app cannot be accessed. You are not authorized to access this particular application. Now let's come back to our browser and set this to no and click on save. And let's come back to our old browser where we are trying to access this application as a user. Now let's initiate a logout request by going to login.microsoftonline.com/logout.srf. And now what we will do is we'll again go to the same URL, which is our application URL, and I'm again getting prompted to enter my username and password. I'll select my username, I'll enter my password. Expected behavior is I should be prompted for MFA, and that's exactly what's happening. The new code is 003136. I'll click on verify, and let's see what we get now. Now the expected behavior is I should get prompted to enter my on-prem details or my on-prem credential, because as of now Kerberos constraint delegation has not been done for this particular application, or single sign-on is not implemented. Okay. And as you can see now, I'm getting the prompt to enter my on-prem credentials, so I'll do the same thing again, and which is entering my username and password, and that's it. I should get access to my application. Now, the reason behind entering credential twice, because SSO is not enabled. Now, there will be a different video for that as well, but as of now, just keep this as a reference that if you are enabling Azure AD Pre-Auth, Azure AD can get the conditional access done for you, add one more layer of security, and then the user has to enter the credentials for the on-prem application. Okay, so this was all about knowing how you can use both the methods to implement authentication through Azure AD Application Proxy and provide remote access to your on-prem application. Now let's just check the location of the event viewer logs, which you can refer to if there are any issues. Okay. So for that, I'm going to switch to my machine, the same machine where we have the application running as of now and the connector, and that's my DC. Go to Event Viewer, go to Application and Service Logs, then click on Microsoft, and then click on this folder, which is AAD Application Proxy. You can click on Connector as well as Updater. These section will list down all the events that are getting generated by both the connector as well as updater. Now if I'll click on the admin section, as you can see there are some errors wherein my machine might have faced any issues in terms of connecting any of the URLs, as well as for every successful authentication you will get a message like transaction ID. Okay. So this was all about knowing how the Azure AD Application Proxy works in a nutshell, how you can publish an application. Let's talk about a quick summary of what all we have discussed in this particular video. We have discussed about license requirements, setup requirement, how to publish an on-prem application, and which logs you should refer to troubleshoot if there are any issues. In the next video, we are going to talk about security benefits of Azure AD Application Proxy. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time. And if you think that this channel is helping you to learn something new, please feel free to subscribe. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time.